welcome to the podcast. We have an exciting session with Matt, and he'll introduce himself. With that, let me pass it to Matt. Welcome, Matt.
Manju, I'm delighted to be here today. What an exciting sort of few months we've been going through. I mean, just in general, but especially from a supply chain perspective, it's been absolutely sort of remarkable. I think you and I sat down and had a chat about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and in just 3 weeks, things have changed dramatically. Some have been caused by things that are going on in the Middle East, which we're all familiar with. But there's also innovation, agents starting to buy things on behalf of people. It really is quite an exciting time to be around. I thank you very much for coming on to this podcast. You guys do an amazing job of educating people, particularly in the space of supply chain. I really appreciate being part of this. My role, as you know, in Google is I'm based out of the UK. I tend to deal with processes that sit around SAP, so it tends to be finance, procurement, supply chain, HR processes. And I would say one of the most exciting areas right now is the whole space of supply chain, and the way that we're buying things is fundamentally changing. So I'm delighted to be on the podcast to chat about that.
Matt, absolutely. I think the way you narrated or framed things, what's happening in the world, is something I want to add to before we get started with the first question. I do echo what you just said. The way world is moving, the amount of change we see every weeks, and it used to be quarters and years. Now it's like month, and now suddenly in weeks we are seeing the change. While you sit at London and look at your perspective around the world, and I sit in San Francisco and look at my perspective on the world, we do travel together as a part of broader Google ecosystem, working with Google over the last 10 years. It's an amazing experience working across customers, across countries, how they're adapting to world as we know is changing.
Yeah.
Not just the Middle East, but the innovation that's happening in parallel with AI and agentic AI, agentic commerce. It's absolutely exciting time to be in. However, with all the experience that you bring in, Matt, I just want to remind our users and myself many times, it's like, while there's all this excitement, it's important to be very pragmatic. The world of process and physical world, the goods and the ERPs, they have their own musical orchestra that they play, and we need to be in harmony with them. With that said, Matt, you work closely with enterprise modernization, ERPs, and planning systems. You have been doing this for decades. When you hear autonomous supply chain or planning 3.0, what does that practically mean for a large enterprise today, especially given the current context?
Well, if I look at what we're doing at the moment, the agentification of any process, but in particular supply chain, afford us the opportunity to sort of break what I call an 80-20 rule. So traditionally, when we've looked at processes, and these are supply chain processes and other processes in an organization, we've spent 80% of our time working on the top 20% of whatever it may be. So fundamentally, that is shifting now. We can now send agents to go off and do that other 80% for us. So the first thing it affords us the opportunity to do from a supply chain perspective is look for optimizations in areas of the supply chain that we would not normally have had time, energy, or really just a return on investment from a cost and resources perspective to go after. So that's the first thing that's kind of, I think, come out, and it's very interesting. I sort of sign up less to this idea that we're going to get rid of loads of people. And in fact, there was a study recently by Harvard, and they did this with operational processes with Procter & Gamble, and they showed that applying AI to an individual process or someone in an individual working in that process was about a 17% increase in efficiency, but giving AI to that person and allowing them to go after that Pareto rule, allowing them to sort of extend their capabilities, was a 200% increase in efficiency. So first of all, I think that's where the optimization is going to come from when we look at this new generation supply chain. Now, there's also another added benefit to this, is when we agentify a supply chain and we codify some of what we're doing as an individual, a lot of these processes that would have been fragmented, they would have been siloed, and quite frankly, they would have taken a lot of time to figure out, can be very fast in the way that we react to them and the way that we sort of work. And it can change the dynamics of how we start to think about our supply chains. So for example, I came from a background of looking at integrated logistics. And a lot of the benefits of having an integrated logistics organization is that it's a very simple way to sort of think about the movement of your goods. You induct those goods into that provider. They take care of all the complexity for you. But what's happened with this change and turmoil is that we're now thrust back into having to figure some of this stuff out. When we get a route shut down because there's some sort of either change in the dynamic of the way our customers are buying, or there's a change in the way that we can just get access through that route. We now have to maybe negotiate these contracts on an individual basis, and so we go from having something that's very repeatable and set up to actually having to work it out for ourselves. And that's when the agents and Agentify really kick in. They can go do that stuff at lightning speed for us in a way that we've never been able to do it before. And so it's not just an efficiency gain and effectiveness gain, it's an elasticity gain. And I think that elasticity part with the unknown nature of the way things are at the moment is going to be critical for companies in this space that are going to win. And ultimately, the vision, as you know, with all of this stuff, is to go from ERP systems that are systems of records to ERP systems that are systems of intelligence. And I think supply chain is number one space for that to happen.
Very, very well put together, Matt. There are many things that you touched upon. The systems of intelligence, there's many variations of names that Gartner and Forrester uses, but broadly system of intelligence setting and system of records. And those efficiencies and efficacies that you mentioned, we are seeing some of those things happen as we work with customers, and that's fascinating. And to some extent, it is overwhelming customers and how efficient and fast it's getting. Not to undermine the process and change management complexity, because technology moves faster than process and people. And to the other point that you mentioned, which is when you think about these processes which were not connected before, now start appearing that you can connect them through data.
Mm-hmm.
And logistics reference that you just brought up, it's a lot about trucks and physical movement and the physics aspect of it. And when you are able to do faster mathematics, you're able to move physics faster, and that's incredibly powerful. And if math was slowing the physics, and now we are able to speed up math through agents, not only just do the math, but take actions for us. And the agentic commerce, as you mentioned, I did get one example in mind as I was thinking about it. We all experience ordering food, whether I'm sitting in San Francisco or London or in India. In India, in fact, the grocery delivery, for the most part, is 7 minutes. Think about the math and physics combining together and guaranteeing 7 minutes. And if so, why can't we make math 1 minute for every company, which is the planning, whether it's manufacturing or supply chain? So that's how I think about it. Now, For years, Matt, we have felt autonomous planning, felt aspiration for majority of the companies. What has fundamentally changed in the last 3 to 5 years that now makes this realistic at enterprise scale for most companies?
Yeah, well, I mean, I should really turn that question back to you at the end of this, but let me give you my perspective. So, I mean, there's three things I think in this space that's made it possible. First of all, there's three C's, if you like. Cloud. So we can have the ability to store massive amounts of data at a very low cost. These systems have always been there, but they've been somewhat siloed. We have the opportunity to bring the data into one place and let the agents work across that data. And actually, you know, that allows us to do concepts, not just to sort of optimize and speed up, but we have this concept of self-optimizing ERP or self-optimizing processes. So what's really cool is when we identify a process and then the agents start to work together to make that process more efficient. But the first enabler of that is the cloud. The second thing that's kind of an enabler is the connectivity. You know, I think the ability to get sensor data in real time has never been better. You know, a lot of, you know, even the sort of tier 3 logistics providers, to use that example again, they, you know, they give their drivers, you know, mobile phones that are quite capable of tracking their location, quite capable of giving information about, you know, where those goods are at only one point in time. That sort of data would have been very difficult to gather maybe 10 or 15 or even 20 years ago. So the ability to capture data at that point, and then as we've been talking all along, that cognition element is really important. Now, we've been able to apply rules to these systems for years. We've even been able to provide non-deterministic rules to these systems for a number of years. What's changed here, though, is the ability for these systems to have a degree of knowledge. If you define cognition, let's sort of look at that last one a little bit. Cognition, if you go look it up, is defined as reasoning. Got that. And it's much better than it was before. It's non-deterministic in nature, so we can make and what that basically means, for those who are not familiar with the terms, is rather than being if then else, which is deterministic, if we're non-deterministic, we can make judgments. We can say, well, you know, I know logically I should only put this amount of goods on this particular lane, but you know what? I'm going to make a judgment. I think that we're going to need a bit more of those items. So the reasoning has become a very sort of, you know, non-deterministic in that sense. The second thing is, do we have knowledge of the business processes to perform that cognition? We're able to build the knowledge graphs, which is the technical way to gather the information in the context of all those processes, a lot easier than we were able to in the past. And a lot of those business processes have been well documented in an unstructured way, and that was the problem. They were in PDF files, and we couldn't codify that without having someone sat in front of a computer screen. But we can now bring those standard operating procedures in, so that operational knowledge. But the most important thing that's come to bear in the last few years is the large language model and that general knowledge, that cognition. Those three things are needed to drive cognition, and that gives us that final C. And so those building blocks, this is the first time that those building blocks have been in place, and I think been accessible and democratized. I mean, if you were UPS or some major organization, you had had access to this type of technology a few years ago, but it would have cost multi-millions. You know, now someone can wake up and start to build these things and start to use these things and really, you know, really sort of drive the value out of it. So I think that's why autonomous planning is now possible technically, but I think there's probably a lot of other reasons why it's possible commercially, culturally, and a few others. So I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, so before I chime in, first of all, this is one of the exciting part of my job, to work with some of the amazing people like you who not only have the field and hands-on experience of working with enterprise customers, implementing ERPs with deep AI knowledge and the Google perspective. So when I hear the building blocks that you just emphasized on, why for cognition, reasoning, thinking, those building blocks are not only available but it's economically viable. We take this, package this as a solutions partner, and make it easier for our customers. Our customers, which are our mutual customers, um, over the last 10 years working across regions, what we have learned is generally customers are very familiar with Google. That's a
Mm,
no brainer. They use Google Maps, Google Search. They know that it's saving them time in their personal life. The gap that existed for a while was in the enterprise setting. How can everything become real time? It makes sense, but I don't know how to do it, or whether they are internally ready. So when I think about internal readiness, um, what we have seen as partner is, it's usually technology is not the one which is the bottleneck, or it's usually the internal readiness, and I'll slice that out in few different layers. First is the people awareness of the technology. You can call it change management, technology readiness, skills, or even knowing how to put it all together. Right? Even if they don't have parts of knowledge, are they organizationally even ready? So, it doesn't mean like everybody needs to go redo everything, but incrementally are they evolving from a people perspective so that they can bring the technology into the process. Without people adoption, everything else falls apart. Then the second thing that has improved a lot, because thanks to the media plus YouTube plus everything else, that the way they consume information, including Gemini and Chat GPT, so they're becoming very knowledge aware,
mhm,
which means now they want to act right now. So the pressure from the board and CXOs and top down is also trickling in, because the board and the executives know that there is efficiencies possible, like you mentioned in the earlier response to the earlier question around Harvard Business Review and what efficiencies are seen and so on. The board and executives are seeing it. So now from the people, then they're going into the process side of it and saying, how would we reimagine? First, how would we reimagine our organization? Great. Which includes, how do we reimagine our role, our task? What task should be fully done by AI, partially done by AI, or cannot be done by AI? Understanding that. Then why do I need people where? So this notion that we don't need people, AI will do everything, I don't buy into that. Yes, maybe in some areas it'll happen, but
mm,
at least in the supply chain and planning and manufacturing world, there are two dimensions to that, right? And one is, as humans, we just want to produce more. That's how we are. People didn't have cars, now they have two or three cars. Maybe in few years, a few decades, they want flying cars. Our needs will increase. The problems we solve will increase. Which means the enterprises, as they structure themselves to serve their customers better, put their people to better use, call it agentic workforce transformation, whatever ways they're trying to embed AI into every role and every task. Also related to what you said, which is that reimagine the process. If something was taking a month, why not 1 minute? Oh, if that's extreme, why not 15 minutes? Why not 1 hour? So at
mm,
least see where in the spectrum do you want to be. Every process doesn't need to be optimized from a month to a minute, but you have to do the stress test to see what would your competition do. Is the economics and the feasibility and viability allow it? If it allows it, then you should. Sometimes it's not economically viable to make everything, and it's not needed to make every process to run in real time. So that's an enterprise judgment. So the people, process, and of course your data has to be organized, right? So most data warehouses are designed for humans to sit and stare in front of the screen looking at dashboards, running pivot tables. That's the planning world that I come from. I used to work at Cisco, amazing company ahead of its time. Always, I still got some of my best learnings at Cisco. However, every company is disrupted. And as they think about why should people be staring at the screen looking at spreadsheets, because as a planner it's hard to scan more than 500,000 rows and 40 columns and be effective to run 100 scenarios. So there are points that we have to look at data, organize it to be agent friendly. And of course, the policies, the security policies, how do you evolve agents to have control and access? Like every major technology, people tend to worry about it. Oh, it's like even electricity. People used to worry that you will die if you touch it. Yes, that's part of the scenario, but majority is good and safe. So that's going to happen with AI too. So now organizations are now not only seeing that many of these things are possible, but there's this heightened sense of urgency in 2026. That's why, as we spoke at the beginning, Matt, that we are seeing everything move fast. It's like the hyperscalers, including Google, is innovating fast, and it's hard to catch up with the releases. And our customers want to roll it out fast. What used to be a POCs last year, now it's pilots and production in weeks. We make it easier for customers by calling fixed price, fixed scope, dream big, start small, scale fast. When you're starting small, let's fix the scope and a fixed price. So that way everybody has accountability to deliver things. So all of this have been possible working with Google because of the focus. So hope that builds on what you just said, Matt.
It does. I want to react to because I think it's really important. I mean, first of all, I think the role that you guys are playing in where AI is going is absolutely critical. The AI is an amazing technology, but it needs people with experience of the process and imagination to think of where that's going to go to really lead the space, and that's what you do brilliantly. That's what I've seen in your series of podcasts is you're trying to say what is the impact of this and where is it going, and you're giving your customers a vision of what that looks like from a system perspective in some pre-built sort of thoughts and processes that you put together. And that's invaluable because I think until people see it, they don't necessarily get it. And by using it quickly, like you've just said, in a matter of weeks, they finally get it. The reason I feel passionate about that is I think AI is a sort of technology that isn't like a rollout of a system. It's something that you have to sort of develop as a skill, and you need to let the implication of these technologies really get into the DNA of your organization. And I see that as one of the biggest challenges at the moment is culture and vision. How do I develop a culture of safe space and creativity in my workforce so they can use AI effectively, not feel like they're going to lose the job, but it's going to be a tool for them? And then how do we develop the vision of how AI is going to impact our business? And this might resonate with you. And this isn't the first time we've been here. I remember very early on in my career when I didn't have gray hair, I sat in the offices of a company called British Home Stores. And I don't know, you might not be familiar with them, but back in the day when I was a little young lad and before the internet, it wasn't like we didn't order stuff from home. We used to have those big catalogs delivered. I don't know if you remember those. They used to be quite exciting. They'd be delivered about 2 inches thick and you'd flick through them. And you would go and you'd order your stuff over the telephone. I'll have product 1, 2, 3, 4, and you'd circle it, and you had a little form that you could post in. It was fantastic. And what I was there in the e-commerce internet shift, and there to sort of give you the punchline to the British Home Stores. If you're not familiar with them, they don't exist anymore, right? And many people think that British Home Stores didn't exist because they didn't put into e-commerce onto their organization. And that's not true. They did. I was there. I was in the room with those people as they were thinking about e-commerce. And if you think about it, British Home Stores should have beaten Amazon, right from the very beginning. They were a home shopping company. They had a distribution network, the warehousing network. They had the catalog, right? They had everything. But what they didn't have is culturally is an understanding of how this technology was going to change the way the consumer bought from them. They saw e-commerce as another channel for taking an order. They looked at it and they went, oh, instead of entering the order in as a form, someone can enter it in on our website and we will receive that order like we have done before. And we'll distribute it as we've done before. And what Amazon did is they looked at this and they went, no, you're missing the point. What customers really want is not an online order form. They want convenience and they want the product there next day. And Amazon built out a logistics and supply chain network. And I probably shouldn't, as my kids would say, glaze on Amazon, given the fact that they're a hyperscaler competitor. But from a logistics point of view, they did a fantastic job of changing, how we sort of interact from a shopping perspective, because they, in their DNA, understood e-commerce. They understood the shift of internet. It wasn't like an add-on to their business. It was the core DNA of the way that they were working, and they felt the implication of that. And British Home Stores didn't. And as a consequence, they didn't get it. And they're not here now. And I think that is the same with AI. And it's worrying because there's a statistic that I picked up at an AI conference the other day. I don't know if you know this, but the statistic is this, and you can do it as a show of hands in a room, and it plays out reasonably well. It says that 15% of people are like you and me. They're excited about AI. They love it, right? 65% are like, I've used it, not sure. And then the rest absolutely hate it. Now, we're never going to change the folks that hate it, but we need to transform that 65% from just thinking AI, like British Home Stores thought, oh, it's an add-on thing. It's something that's going to help me write an email. And we need to get AI into their DNA to realize, no, this is going to potentially change the way we think about supply chains, because the constraints of what we've had over the last 50 years have gone now, and we can teach these agents to do stuff that weren't possible. And that's the piece. So I couldn't be more in agreement with you about that cultural aspect, that change aspect, and that motivation aspect. That is it. And if anybody's watching here from an organization and thinking, what's my number one thing? All of us as vendors will be saying data and choosing your AI provider, and that's valid. But really, it's cracking that nut. And also from a leadership perspective, the other thing I think is really important is this is the first time I think that the vision of an organization and how this looks in the future isn't going to come from an offsite meeting in the boardroom. Normally, a lot of smart people who know this business get together, they troubleshoot it, they work together to sort of come up with a transformational thought process. That's changing. The best ideas we're finding in Alphabet are coming from our bottom up, or at least middle up in the organization. We've done things in our organization, like creating dynamic supply chain watchtowers so that we can make our supply chain truly elastic. Did we have a board meeting on that? No, we didn't. A group of really smart people that run our supply chain got together and go, God, wouldn't it be great if? And they built it. And using technologies like yourselves, and providers they did it. We've managed to look at our spares and repairs, our E&O, how we manage that supply chain, how we understand how we can get rid of either get rid of parts or redistribute parts in a way that we've never been able to do before. We were accumulating a lot of parts in our data centers, because it's very complicated to understand whether a capacitor can be used is going to be needed without understanding the associated bill of materials for the server that it sits in, and what our capacity plan is for it globally, and should that capacitor should be moved to a different. So we just left it, and these sort of spares sort of grew, and again, it's a problem that it just you looked at it. Yes, it was a space in the data center, which is really important to us right now, but it just wasn't worth the energy on the people to go fix that problem. But a group of folks in our in part of our business that's looking at servicing and maintaining the data centers got together and went, do you know what? I think agents change the way we look at this, and so we've now fixed that problem, and we've opened up space in our data center. And no one said, oh look, I'm going to use agents to open up space in the data center. Someone got together and said, we need to really sort of look at this problem. So I guess I am, as you can probably gather, really passionate about this whole human side and cultural side of it, because if we don't change the way that leadership thinks about getting information from the business, we don't empower the business users that really understand the problem with this technology in an effective way and motivate them, then I worry that a lot of companies will go the way of the British Home Stores in cross industries, not just retail, and it will be that is the deciding factor, not the databases and not the best models. It'll be the people. Sorry for that rant, but I think you hit on something that's just critical.
I want to recap what you just said, and it's such an amazing story and a journey of real life, how you saw British Home Stores where you worked. So you knew the reality of what is happening inside, as well as you saw how the market evolved with Amazon.com and everything else after, right? So there are few things, there are many aspects, but few things that stood out is the vision and cultural aspect. It starts all the way from the top down. So that's critical. And innovation doesn't need to come and direction from top down. It can come from anywhere in the organization.
Yes, I think if I underline that one, sorry to interrupt you, I want to underline that one, because I think that's a really big ask of a lot of leaders, to say you don't know the answer to this, and it's a two-way.
And that's a very as a person, it's a very it can be overwhelming. It hurts people's ego.
Yes.
That I don't know the answer, especially if I'm high up in the hierarchy. I'll tell you a real story from my end. One of the developers came and asked me a specific question, and I didn't know the answer. And I asked, do I know the answer? Do you think I know the answer, or Gemini knows more? Gemini knows more. Then why are you asking me? Ask me something what Gemini cannot answer, right? So there are very few things that it cannot answer. So then you come to me for that, then I will add some value. But it takes some amount of, and the developer started laughing, right? As a CEO, I'm saying this to the developer that I don't know enough. If we as leaders don't realize and recognize that, we are fooling ourselves. That's my personal take, right?
Yeah.
No management consulting company will come in and give me a 200-page PDF to say how to run my company if I don't realize this very fundamental thing, and if I don't treat every person as whatever level they are, they can be many levels up if they use AI right. The other aspect that stood out as you're talking about is, why is this so profound? And when I heard from Sundar Pichai, Google CEO, say that the AI is going to be more profound than electricity, and that kind of never got off my mind. I was like, how can something be more profound than electricity? And every year as it passed by, now every month, You can see why. And and as we think about these platform shifts from mainframe to client server to internet, and let's pause for internet for a second. You saw a business who are doing commerce. They saw electronic commerce, e-commerce as we know, as one of the additional channel and not the main channel. If it became the main channel, the game is different. That's what Amazon.com did. Now this shift is bigger than that shift from all the people I talked to. And one of the definitions I got is because you cannot see what you're dealing with, it's way more powerful, and the magnitude and scale at which it can operate with the compute memory and network becoming cheaper and cheaper, which means you can connect more information and dots than humanly possible. So it's crossed the threshold. So when you take a platform shift like this, who is affected? Everybody from the board all the way to the lowest level, whether it's analyst, engineer, intern, doesn't matter. Everybody's affected. So everybody has to reorient themselves. So they have to go back to your earlier points around process and technologies and people, and every aspect has to be rethought. And it has to be done fast within a year so that you're not behind in your competitive landscape. It puts pressure on organization, and I do tell people that we have to deal more with EQ this year than IQ, because IQ, there's infinite intelligence in your pocket.
It,
So
it, it you
yeah,
know, that's a very interesting thing. EQ rather than I suppose the IQ's gone into the Geminis of this world a little bit. So it's just we're left with EQ from that perspective. It's there's one thing I want to say about this shift though, and we're doing a bit of a series on it, is that, and maybe it's because I've got the grey hair. I'm quite passionate about the fact that the people who stand to gain the most out of AI are often the people that are most afraid of it. There's a little sort of equation that a friend of mine came up with, and I like it. It's a bit cheesy. So it says AI plus experience is wisdom at scale, and I kind of like that. And I think if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, AI, and by the way, I mean, Henry Ford had this he said, if you think something isn't going to happen, you're right. If you think it is going to happen, you're right. I almost feel that way about AI. Is if someone says, oh, I don't think AI is going to make a difference, you're probably right. If someone says, I think AI is going to change the world, you're probably right. It's really down to us and how we as individuals are going to drive this forward. But if you are someone that's watching this thinking, oh, it's a bit too much change for me, the thing I would say is the people that stand to gain the most out of AI are the folks in the organization that really get the process and the nuances of that business. 100%. You cannot encode 30 years of supply chain experience into an AI system. You can take the books and put it in there, but you can't take that judgment, that wisdom that someone has got over all those years. But what the AI can do is they can amplify that person. They can take that wisdom and instead of applying it to 10 product lines in a day, it can apply it to 10,000 product lines in a day. So if this stuff sounds scary and you're watching this, don't be scared, lean in on it, because potentially you're the person that might benefit the most from it. And that's why when you said EQ, that people who can connect from that emotional side of this with people, and leaders that can realize that the people that are probably the most frightened of this are the ones that are going to transform the organization the most with it, having that EQ element, that human element, quite frankly. I think they're the ones that are going to be super successful. So sorry for interrupting you, but I think that EQ statement was super important.
Absolutely. Now let's make this all real for our audience to go act on. Here is the scenario, Matt. Retail companies.
Yes.
You and I have already bought things through agentic commerce. So we have the first-hand experience and exposure.
Yes.
This is coming, right? Christmas is coming, and then Amazon, Walmart, and many retailers are preparing for agentic commerce. So the deadline is really October 31st. Whatever we are talking about is not sci-fi or experiment for these companies. They have to act on it like yesterday. So if your agents are going to determine your demand, inventory, margins, price in 60 seconds, you cannot have your supply chain and manufacturing operate old school way.
Yeah.
So if you are to conclude and make it all real for an organization to be ready, otherwise some of them will lose to competition in a pretty rapid pace. What would your advice be to enable autonomous supply chain and manufacturing to be agentic commerce ready and what they can act today?
You've really got to. This is going to sound so weird, and I think the problem with AI is until you've experienced some of this stuff, it just sounds a bit inflated, doesn't it? It sounds a bit weird. I think you, as much as you think about your human employees, you've got to think about your agentic workforce. And as much as you might think your human employees, they need healthcare and they need lunch and what have you, you've got to think about what an agentic workforce needs. It needs clear access to high performant data. It needs to be able to get access to data with inside and outside of the organization. It needs to be able to do that in a controlled way and have access to human beings when it gets stuck. And you might think, well, that just sounds so far-fetched. Well, let me give you a practical example. Let's imagine you're an effective e-commerce retailer and your product, not all products are going to be agentic this year, by the way. I mean, just to give you an example, my personal experience of agentic buying was buying Coraline roofing for my shed, right? Now, the reason that worked was because whenever I do research for hardware stuff like that, I always think that's time in my life I'm never going to get back again. So what happened in that scenario is I didn't know how much I needed. I didn't know how many elements. So I went into Gemini. I said, I've got a 26 by 12 foot shed, and it did all the mathematics, did all the calculations. And then I literally copied and pasted that into actually our new Gemini and Chrome. And I said to Gemini, which websites would you go to? And then I said, go to those websites and get the transaction up to completion and tell me which one's the cheapest. So I literally didn't do anything other than say, here's the dimensions of the shed. And then when it came and found the final place, I clicked buy. Now in the future, it's not even going to be like that. Like you just pointed out, you will be in the search, you will be in your large language model. The large language model will offer up 3 solutions. It will go out to the website, it will give your address, it'll all the information you need, and it will just say, look, you've got 3 options here, and you'll hit buy there and then. So that's my experience. And at that point, I'm like, wow. Right. And by the way, it was easier, and it was a third of the price. I did call my local hardware store up. It was a third off of that cost. Cheaper, easier. So certain products are going to go that way. Now, let's take that and look at it from an agentic workforce perspective. So now you've got a website, right? Now you've got an agent that is coming to that website. So you're an agentic worker in inverted commas, which is the agent that's going to go buy. If you don't consider the needs of that agentic buyer, then you are not going to be on the list of those shops. So as a simple example, agents, when they come up to your workforce, will either want a protocol like the A2A commerce protocol that it can just talk to its other agent on the other side. But the very basic, it needs a vector search on the e-commerce site. It needs that vector search to be more effective in the way that it works. And so you've now got to think, the reason I'm going through all this is you need to think of your external processes, your customer, and your internal processes from the point of view of the agent. So what do you think happens if my agent, going by my Coraline roofing, comes to your website, it is not vector indexed, it can't search properly on it, it just moves to the next one, right? It doesn't matter how pretty the graphics are or how much you've done brand management, it doesn't care about brand management anymore. It just cares about reasoning to write the right solution for my customer. So that's my big sort of thing. When you're thinking of your business, think of your people processes, but also think of your agentic workforce and your agentic customer, and what do they need from you to be effective. And if you do that, I think you'll be in good stead.
That's amazing, Matt. As we conclude this session, I do want to highlight that at Pluto 7, having worked with Google for the last 10 years, experiencing the real-time platform and agentic capability evolution over the last 2.5 years, not only have we built internally an agentic workforce, and we call it operations in a box, but more importantly, for the retail customers, we have been enabling, and it's accelerating now through our planning in a box Pi Agent being the agentic capability for commerce, which bundles a lot of Google Cloud capabilities like Gemini Enterprise, Google Cortex, and MD, and many more, 400 plus components. We don't bundle all the 400, but depending on the customer, we package it right. So we can roll out these solutions to the customers in 4 weeks, and they can take it to production in under 3 months at a fixed price. Now, customers, when they look at it initially, typically the reaction has been, oh, we didn't think it's going to be that fast, right? Because they're not internally not ready and they need to scramble to get ready, because as retailers, they are under pressure now. But the Google has truly democratized AI, and we are able to package that effectively to get to this kind of a model. When I worked in the last 25 years, Matt, and when I looked at 99.9% of the softwares, they are not agent ready. They put AI as bolt on and not built in. The very few exceptions I see, like Palantir, they are architected for such purposes. However, they are like taking Rolls Royce to groceries. So customers do need the majority of the customers cannot afford that. And then when we work with Google, we are making it affordable to everybody, because the retail end customer, like you said, the brand loyalty is changing. Agents are making the decision. You can't have a fast agent and behind your supply chain and manufacturing is running at the old slow pace. They need to move fast as well, because the legacy supply chain softwares, the ERP softwares, are designed for humans staring at screens all day and making decisions. They're not ready for agents. Some of them will evolve, most of them will not. And that's why these 2 years are disruptive. And we are super excited working with Google. And thank you, Matt, for an amazing conversation. It's intriguing. Every month is going to be better than the previous month. Like you said, when people internalize AI as I and not some separate thing, they're going to be superheroes. I don't remember the exact phrase you used, but I think that's kind of what you meant. It amplifies them. Okay.
I do. Yeah, AI superheroes. Yeah, the term was AI plus experience is wisdom at scale. So that was my wisdom. Yeah, so I like the AI superhero. And can I just reciprocate, thank you and the work that you're doing, because you're gathering the ideas, the vision for the future, and that is not easy to do in this shift. I would, again, gray hair. My career started in when we were taking standard processes and putting them up on the internet. We now call them SaaS solutions, back in '96. When we did that, we had paper-based processes, and we just mimicked what the paper-based process was in the system. It was easy. It's easy. I mean, technically it was difficult, but we didn't have to rethink what those processes meant and what the business meant, because of what the AI opens up as an opportunity. And that's what you guys are doing. You're helping, through your vision, through building pre-built technology. You're taking those ideas, you're transforming the way we're thinking about supply chain. Every time I talk to you, I mean, we spoke to each other 3 weeks ago, and in those 3 weeks, you're evolved that vision even further. So, right back at you. Thank you very much for being part of this, and thank you for the opportunity to chat on one of your wonderful podcasts. It's been a real treat.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for your time. And we are in for an exciting journey together. For our viewers, thank you for your time and look forward for the next session as well. Have a great day.